it on airplane mode.
I just want to start off by saying thank you to Elon Musk and SpaceX for sponsoring this video and this movie. Nah, I'm just kidding. But SpaceX does make a cameo appearance in the movie, which was pretty cool. So last night I went to go watch Moonfall. You know, it's one of those movies that you kind of know what's gonna happen, you know. So the movie starts off, they're kind of up in space, you know. You have the two main characters. You have Joe Fowler and you have Brian Harper. They're up in space. They're kind of doing just a maintenance of one of the satellites. Suddenly just a bunch of nanotech shows up, and it's like a cloud of nanotech, and it messes with them, and unfortunately one of the crew members dies. And you know, the nanotech prevents them from using any sort of electronics, so he kind of has to land the ship back on Earth with like zero communications. And unfortunately one of the crew members dies at the beginning. They go down to Earth, they have the hearing of what happened, and he tries to tell them like, hey, like there's some sort of alien that attacked us, and you know, I'm sorry that we couldn't do anything more to save our friend, our crewmate. And they brush it off. They ask crewmate Fowler, they're like, hey, could it have been anything else besides aliens? And she just says, honestly, I was unconscious. It could have been anything. Fast forwards to 10 years in the future, you see Brian Harper kind of torn. He's living off by himself. He's isolated because the world didn't believe his story. So obviously NASA kind of brushed him off to the side. And you see Fowler in a position of power, I guess, within NASA. She's one of the higher ups, and that nanotech that attacked them all those years prior has cemented its seed in the moon, and it causes it to shift off course. And so there's this additional main character named Casey, who he studies this like religiously. He studies this religiously. He's always doing the math, and you see him kind of isolated and with his computers, and he like hacks into UC Irvine to kind of like double check and try to get it out there. So he's one of the first people to know that the moon is off course. But obviously, since he's not someone who is associated with NASA, they don't really give a shit.
You knew all this was happening before NASA.
You're the unidentified source?
Oh, yes.
One of the things that I really did like about this movie was some of these shots are really good, especially, but I think the biggest scenes are when the moon and the Earth are kind of colliding with one another. You can see the effects of what the moon would do if said scenario were to occur, if something were to kind of shift the gravitational pull that the moon and the Earth have. You see, it's a sci-fi flick, they exaggerate it, but it's still, those scenes are really, really impressive. And obviously the director of this movie has a past with movies like this. He really nails that aspect of the end of the world, you know, and you really feel like it's a race against time. And one of the things that I also really liked about this is there's two stories going on simultaneously. You know, you have the crew members that are up in space trying to figure out how to stop this alien tech, and you have people on Earth who are just trying to survive. Most of the story on Earth revolves around the two sons of Fowler and of Harper. So you kind of see them going through their struggles of trying to get into a base or just into safety in general. And you just see the Earth just falling apart as they're like progressing around the landscapes. And I think those scenes are extremely well done, you know. But there's just so many asteroids coming in at all times that, you know, almost all of Earth is always getting like decimated. And there's a part where the moon comes so close to the Earth that it's both of our, or both gravities just kind of like conflict with one another. So you see that it's like pulling up, and I mean, like, the Earth just starts to crumble up, the moon starts falling down. Now, there's one thing that I kind of want to discuss about something. Not to say that I disliked it, but it got confusing very quickly. Um, so obviously there's the climax. Well, I'm not gonna spoil it, but there's a point where the movie does get extremely confusing. Um, when they realize who they're fighting against and what the origin of this nanotech is, it just it tries so hard to be something very different, but at the same time tries to do it in a way that is overly complicated. So it gets really confusing just because they have so much information that they want to pack in like 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes. And out of nowhere, it's just like, I mean, it made sense to me, but I'm just saying there's parts where I had to stop and kind of ignore a little bit of what they were talking about so that I could piece what they had said before. And then as I'm hearing what they're saying after, piece that together with this. So it's one of those movies that if you want to kind of understand what's going on, you would maybe have to rewatch the scene because it all happens really fast. Overall, it wasn't terrible. Like I said, a lot of the scenes that involve the Earth kind of falling apart, the moon falling apart, you know, people racing to survive. There's a scene where the son of Harper, the son of Fowler, and they have this like caretaker that takes care of the little boy. They're all driving, and they get stopped. You know, they get stopped by some local people who are just trying to survive as well. And ultimately they meet up again and they have to fight for oxygen because it leads to the point where the Earth is running out of oxygen. They were fighting for oxygen. So you see those like sort of conflicts that anybody would go through. You know what I mean? And I thought that was pretty. It made the movie interesting, and not just kind of like a math and science type adventure. You know, it made the aspect that was part of the science that was up in the moon. It made that part interesting while also adding a different layer of it that was kind of human. You know, we see human conflicts. It isn't just a conflict between us and aliens. There's human and human conflict, and I thought that was really well done. So overall, those were my first impressions. I really enjoyed. Actually, there's a funny story. We were at the AMC screening a week before because this movie isn't supposed to come out until next week. So we watched it, and they messed up the audio and the visual. So we're like watching it, and then there's a point where it skips forward 30 minutes approximately. And everybody in the theater is just like, "Oh man, come on, you just spoiled like half the movie for us, blah 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 blah." And it was just kind of funny because a lot of people would have left at that point, but they stayed. If you want to check out the exact video that I posted about that, it's going to be on my Twitter page. I'll link it in the description. But it was pretty funny. And a lot of people were yelling out, "Just play Spider-Man at this point." And it was funny. But anyways, those were my first impressions. I would say you could watch this movie with somebody else and have a good talk about it. Generally, it's up to you. Like I said on my TikTok, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It's a race against time to save the Earth. There is destruction everywhere. It's not on Avengers level or anything like that, but it is a race against time, and there is a lot of math and science and theories and ideologies that are conflicting, and there is mythology. So if you like that kind of stuff, then you're probably going to enjoy the movie. And this movie kind of does a really good job of enticing the people that really enjoy that kind of genre of movies and genre of just entertainment in general. So I gave it I gave it an 8 just because I thought it was well done for what it wanted to be. I don't think it's the best that the end of the world apocalypse has to offer, but visually it was extremely pleasing, and I am very satisfied with what I saw. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, night, afternoon, morning, wherever you are, and it's gonna be a lot of fun because we have some really fun movies coming out in the future. So if you like what you see, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time, baby.